Hello everybody, so today on my Secret Prehistory series I'm going to be looking at the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. So I'm going to be looking at when they were made, how they were made, why they were made, who made them, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to start with when they were made, and I'm going to tell you it was between 104,000 and 108,000 years ago. Why that long ago? Well, there are a number of reasons why that is the number that I'm going to suggest to you. So first of all, the mathematical precision. Now, I have read this previously, say that because of how precise they were, they had to have had 52,000 years of observations first. And in fact, to be sure, you'd have to have double that to make sure of your findings. So 104,000 years. But of course, that just means that it took 104,000 years to make them. Doesn't make them 104,000 years old, but it does suggest that the technology to make them is 104,000 years older than the pyramids are themselves. So in other words, we're a lot smarter for a lot longer than we give ourselves credit for. The second real reason, and perhaps one of the big reasons, is that there was a big cataclysm that happened roughly about 100,000 years ago, and we know that just before each cataclysm we would be at our technological peak, at least for that period, that mid-cataclysmic period, so that between cataclysms I should say. So because we know all our technology, or most of it, will be wiped out with each cataclysm, and the bits that aren't wiped out will be wiped out by whoever survived the cataclysm, who would go around smashing everything up because they would blame technology on the cataclysm. And we know that this would happen because we know that that's what humans are like. We have seen just in the last few years, we saw Black Lives Matter destroy all these statues, books, all this sort of stuff, just because they didn't like the history. And we saw ISIS do the same thing a few years before that. We've seen Nazi Germany do it, we've seen Stalinist Russia do it, we've seen Rome do it, particularly Julius Caesar with his Library of Alexandria. And we even saw it with the modern Egyptian rulers who tried to destroy the pyramids. And in fact, they did a fair bit of damage, but couldn't completely destroy them. Maybe eventually they could have. I think with our current technology, we could destroy the pyramids, but it would take a long time and a lot of effort, a lot of money to do it. It's not worth doing it. And of course, we'd be destroying an archaeological wonder. They certainly wouldn't be easily be able to be destroyed by a random terrorist or even by a military commander. It would take perhaps 50 or 100 years to dismantle one of them with a lot of determined effort, and even then there'd be bits of it raining. These are things that survive atomic blast. I mean, they'd be damaged, but they would survive cataclysms, absolutely cataclysm proof. It's not a guarantee. They might be damaged depending on what the cataclysm was. It's not always going to be a great flood, it could be all sorts of things, but they're very difficult to break. And I think that sort of gives us a clue as to what they were for. Now, were they aimed at surviving the cataclysm and imparting our knowledge so that technology wasn't lost? Well, if they were, they failed, because we've lost that technology. We do not know currently how they built the pyramids, but how anyone could build them, because we cannot build them today. And we have tried. Don't be confused by anyone that says, oh no, we can easily build them, it's just take a few months. Well, no, we can't. They'll say, oh, well, you just need to have enough manpower. They had 1 million slaves, and they did it. Ancient Egyptians had 1 million slaves. But that actually wasn't really a very high number of slaves compared to their overall population. The Romans had lots of slaves too. Other cultures had lots of slaves. They couldn't build them. And they say, oh, well, they half-built some of them. They half-built small ones that never looked like they were about to be built. If you look at the wreckage of it, they looked like they were mimics. There's no evidence that Egyptians built even a small one, let alone the big ones in Giza. There's evidence that they tried but failed, and there's no evidence that they could build them. Now, again, I know there are things called pyramids in South America and Central America that we know that the ancient people of the time had the capability to build. These are what we call step pyramids. I know they have the same name, but they're not the same thing. So there's no question that the people at the time could build step pyramids. In fact, if you went to and you were looking at a very small pyramid that would be the size of a house, ancient Egyptians would have had the capability to build something that size. They could build houses. You know, and we can certainly do that today. We could build pyramids up to a certain size, and we have. There are pyramids in, well, they're pyramid-like structures in the casinos in Las Vegas, Nevada, that sort of place. So we can do mimicry as well. We can't build the proper ones. So how could you build the pyramids? This is the how part. So you could build them using wireless electricity, right? So wireless electricity was first suggested by Nikola Tesla in 1890, curiously based on his analysis of the pyramids of Egypt. He believed them to be wireless power generators. Interesting, because he believed that when there was no such thing as a power generator at the time. So he believed that they created electricity, and so he created wireless electricity based on it. And then we created our wired electricity, everything we use today, based on that. So wireless electricity came first, current electricity came soon after, and he based it on the pyramids. That's a bit uncomfortable for people that say that the pyramids were tombs. They were not tombs. In fact, this has been proven absolutely comprehensively. They had other places for tombs. They buried bodies completely different spots. Sometimes they buried bodies inside these pyramids, but not usually. And it wasn't like it was one pyramid per body. Some pyramids had 10, 15, 20 bodies in them. Most had none. So they weren't tombs. That was not their purpose. They might have been used as tombs some of the time, but that was not what they were for. That has been comprehensively debunked, that they were not used as tombs. That was not their purpose. Ancient Egyptians had completely different things as tombs. They had sarcophagus, all that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, yeah, there were mummies that were stolen, and so people say, oh well, they were used as tombs, but people stole the mummies and put them on display. They had them for sale in flea markets, all that sort of thing, and that's true. But there's also significant, extensive evidence that they were never used as tombs, not on a widespread basis, and that wasn't their purpose. So their purpose was, at least for the Great Pyramids of Giza, but I actually think probably for all the pyramids, they were used as wireless power generators. They were aimed at creating wireless electricity. Now you might think, well, this is a very inefficient way to do it. You wouldn't get very much power out of it, and that's true. But we've also analysed and proven that all the water, all the copper doors and all that sort of thing have that purpose of creating electricity. Now there is an alternative theory that says, well, that was actually for spiritual reasons, that it creates harmonies and all that, and they were actually built with harmonies. But I'm going to base this on what technology we do know about. We don't have harmonious technology. We have no hint of it. We don't have a clue how that could possibly have happened with vibrations used to split rock or lift it or anything like that. I mean, what we do have is that we know that there's a thing called magnetism and power, and wireless power, that could be used to allow people to fly, to allow people to shoot laser beams out of their fingers. I mean, when you wear an appropriate glove that's got the electricity running through it, and using the electricity and magnetism within a certain magnetic field, you could lift blocks of any size, any weight, any height you wanted to within that field. So using that, if you had a pyramid, or not just a pyramid, but an a wireless electricity power generator nearby, you could build something like the pyramids. Is there another way to do it? Not that I'm aware of. Could we do that today? Yes. In fact, we know that we could do it. Wireless electricity was created before wired electricity. So we didn't really use it very much because it was dangerous. But if we had focused on making it safe, instead of on just abandoning it and making wired electricity, we could have had the ability to shoot laser beams out of our hands, float around or fly, lift things however size we want to any height we want to. That would obviously be something you'd have to have power around. And unfortunately, by the time that Nikola Tesla invented them, we didn't have that power structure. So in order to support that being safe, you'd have to have kings and queens and people who are basically treated as gods over everybody, and you'd have to have a firm power structure that can be enforced with power. We were in more of a democratic time, and so it's just not possible to safely do it. I mean, in order to build up that technology to make it safe, you're talking about hundreds of years and millions of lives lost along the way. So if we'd gone that path, we wouldn't be able to build the pyramids by now, having from 1890, but we would be getting there, and you would be having millions and millions and millions of people dying while they were trying to test it. So clearly, at that time, they had a different power structure, as in a different authority structure, where they didn't mind having people die while testing it, and they didn't mind millions of people dying while testing it. See, today we wouldn't allow that. Even in 1890, they didn't allow that. So that's why they went with a safer Thomas Edison wired electricity. But we still based it on that, which of course was based on the pyramids. So if we imagine that they'd worked out a way to be safe, or they didn't care about people dying by being electrocuted along the way, and I think they probably would have worked out how to be safe with it. They would have had hundreds of years, probably thousands of years working on the safety, and then once they've got that worked out, the actual technology itself fairly simply could make it. But you would, in order to make something as big as that pyramid, you'd have to have an even larger power generator nearby to it. Now, where's that power generator? Well, presumably that larger power generator was not aimed to be indestructible. It's just aimed to be functional. So you would have had to have had really big power generators all around the place, but then bombs and weapons would be able to destroy them, whatever weapons they had at the time. And so then the aim of the pyramid was not to be what everyone relied on for electricity, but rather to be something that would still survive an attack. See, so, because it's impractical as a power generator. It produces so little power and so much effort to build it. What the hell, surely you'd build something simpler that creates more power, and you would. And they would have had them. So they would have probably had these huge things, and perhaps some of them wouldn't have been that huge. And then perhaps they worked out, because they were at war all the time, they would build these things that were sort of electricity fortresses. Now, you wouldn't hide behind a pyramid. That's a bit stupid. Why would you hide behind your power generator? You look at the war going on in Ukraine, they don't do that. But they do protect their power generators. Of course they do. And they wish they could protect them more than they have. And so they would have bunkers and stuff set up somewhere else. But these bunkers probably have been destroyed. All these other things have been destroyed. But the power generator is not, because they built that. So no matter how big the attack, no matter what they threw at them, they still had power. And if you're relying on power to power your best weapons, you would not want them to be destroyed. So this would essentially make that area of Giza a fortress, because you could not, you've got all these huge pyramids, you could not get rid of the power. The wireless power just would not turn off. It wouldn't be aimed at the cataclysm. I think that's a bit excessive. Why would you do that aiming at a cataclysm which you're not going to benefit from for 4,000 years? And which, even if you did it for that, people would probably destroy it anyway, because you can destroy it, it just takes a long time. So I think they built it a fair bit before that. So if we're talking about the cataclysm being 100,000 years ago, that one at least, between 104 and 108. And we know that there was a war. We know that Homo sapiens sapiens, which are modern humans, fought against Neanderthals and Denisovans. Now, it seems most likely that the Denisovans sided with the Homo sapiens sapiens against the Neanderthals. And we probably would have referred to them as giants for the Denisovans, and either goblins or orcs, perhaps both, for the Neanderthals. And of course, they would have said trolls, which were actually Homo sapiens sapiens, just rather large ones, and so forth. And we would have worked it out. But so we won that war. And perhaps with the help of giants. Perhaps giants helped to build these things, perhaps not the pyramids, because the pyramids are far too precise, but perhaps the earlier versions of the power generators that we then used to build the pyramids. So all of that would be a very long and complicated thing. Could we do it today? Yes, but it would take a very long time to work out how to safely do it, a lot of lives lost. No, it'd be unavoidable to lose lots of lives, and I'm talking millions of lives, like 20 million, 50 million lives, just to get that technology going. And it'd take hundreds, thousands of years from today to do it, even if we wanted to do it, and we seem to have no real interest in doing that. So the ancient Egyptians clearly didn't do this, but a pre-ancient Egyptian society did. And we can imagine that there was this time where there was this war. Now this war we know was kept going until the last Neanderthal died about 15,000 years ago, not that long ago. But that wasn't a full-on war at that stage. That was more still hunting for survivors. And in fact, the whole idea of racism almost certainly comes from this war, because we became paranoid because they just would not die. We'd kill them and then there'd still be some left. We just kept having war after war after war after war. Some people, we have this genetic memory that we look at people that are like us but are not us, and we're afraid. That's where racism comes from. It comes from that war. And we know that a fear of robots, or at least realistic lifelike robots, a fear of dolls that are a bit too realistic looking. This is in our genetic memory. And so we know that we had a war with some people that looked like us but weren't us, and that'd have to be the Neanderthals. I know we make fun of the Neanderthals, and they were so pathetic, much like how we probably would have made fun of them when we called them orcs or goblins or trolls or whatever we might have called them. That was our idea, to make them seem so repulsive. But in reality they were smarter than us, stronger than us, and more powerful than us, but we luckily had more of us than there were of them, and we had the help of the giants. Well, we today call them Denisovans. They helped us. We know that they did. We would have probably called them giants at the time. And so they were bigger than us. How much bigger, we're not quite sure, but probably quite a lot bigger than us. Could have been 9 feet tall. Could have been 3 meters tall. That would be pretty big. And considering we would have probably been a lot smaller then, we might have been 10 or 20 centimeters smaller than we are today. So yeah, fighting with these big people helping us out against these clever little sneaky little goblins or orcs or whatever they were. And yeah, pyramids would have been a part of it. Pyramids were not weapons, they were power generators. And they were used to keep the lights on. And you just imagine today, if you're at a war, let's imagine again, war in Ukraine, everybody throwing bombs everywhere, and you have pyramids there that mean doesn't matter what they throw at you, you're still going to have all your power on. And you had weapons that could use that power. It'd be a lot harder for any army to defeat you. It doesn't matter. We wouldn't be having to help out the Ukrainians with weapons. If they had some pyramids, they'd just be like, nope, doesn't matter what you do, we're going to survive. And if everyone had pyramids, there wouldn't be much war. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye-bye now.